All right, and welcome back to another Conquest Corner. On this particular episode, there was a bit of a delay in getting some of these out. Unfortunately, this is the one that had missed there, but a few weeks back, Parabellum Games gave us an update for Conquest Lost Argument of Kings, and I had went through the other factions, but I didn't get the city-states done. And then I had to work a lot more than I normally do. So normally, just so a little peek behind the curtain, normally I record stuff on like a Tuesday or Thursday during the day, sometimes other nights, depending on what happens. But usually that's sort of my times I get to record when I'm not recording, when we're not recording as a group. But those 2 days I was going in at 6 a.m. to work and getting home at about, 8 between 8 and 9 p.m. So I just wasn't able to do the recording. So back at it, wanted to get this one out. So in this video, I'm going to discuss the updates that they've done for the city-states, what I see, thoughts on it, maybe a little bit of ideas of where these changes have led us and all of that. If this is an army that you play and you either have more insights or want to talk about the new type of list you did or changes, what has it really meant for you, please put in the comments below on this video. If you're someone who plays Conquest and you're looking to save some money and help us out as well, we do have a discount code for you. It's Terrain Kickers. You'll find it in the show notes below. There's also a link you can click on as well. It saves you 10%, helps out the show as well, and that helps us be able to keep bringing you content and all, especially as we start getting the incoming approach of a new army. The hope is to be able to do some stuff with that as well. We would really like to also, I at least personally would really like to get back to recording some more Conquest, hoping to do that soon because I'm hoping to start getting out to more regular Conquest days at some of my local stores. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the old and new. So in case you didn't watch any of the other ones, one, you should watch them. They're great videos. But if you happen not to watch them, you'll notice the right side of the screen is the old book. The left side is all of the new stuff. So I'd like to pull them both up because one thing I've realized as I've done a few of these, as well as I've also looked at some of the other alterations over time, Parabellum Games doesn't always denote when a change has occurred. So they tend to put the red in. Sometimes they forget to remove the red. But if something is just removed entirely, there is no red to show that it is missing. So I do like to have both open to try to catch some of the changes that occur in both because it does happen. So we're going to go through and discuss changes. The very first one is that if you take the auxiliaries of these Minotaurs, they got an extra wound. Very good. Minotaurs in general are actually rather good. The problem is, like many things, costing, you don't want to make them necessarily cheaper, but given that extra wound really helps them survive a little bit more. Especially for this army, when you're taking the Hoplists and things like that intermixed, part of your goal in my mind is to just stick. You're taking large units, and the idea is your opponent cannot take down enough. All right, there was some changes to the strategic stack. Overall, all of this is in red, but it really boils down to two things. First, when you pull from your strategic stack, you do it just like you always did. Regiment or character is done. You say instead of passing it to you, I'm going to take the card out of this stack, and I'm going to activate that card. You can't activate anything further because keep in mind with the new changes, if a character model goes, normally outside of this, you can look at the top card of your stack, and if that card corresponds to the unit the character's in, and the unit the character's in has not already activated, you can activate. What this is saying is you can't use that ability. If you pull from the strategic stack, as soon as that action is done, or those actions, I should say, that turn is done for that model, whatever it is, it's done. You can't do a normal thing, activate strategic stack character, and then have that character activate their unit. So they stop you from doing that. The other thing that they give you, so this is essentially sort of some swaps that they did with one of the banners and a few other pieces. The regiment that gets activated from your strategic stack counts as inspired until the end of the round, even if other rules don't allow them to have it. So phalanx, automaton, those sort of things, which normally would prevent you, you still get it. So that is the big change there. The AER Stark also did change as well. You notice, essentially they added, or they changed it around quite a bit. What the AER Stark used to do, one of the things, it would do some stuff related to withdrawals, and you get +1 to your march if you're pulled from the strategic stack. Now, if your card comes that strategic stack, you get that +1 to your march, although you'll notice now it's always considered to be active, where before it was when they're on the battlefield. They've pretty much universally changed it that your main abilities, your supremacies, are just always on for most things. Okay, the other key feature they did is that instead, once per battle, you can begin the command phase by putting a card on the stack. It does not count as having used the strategic stack for the round. So remember, normally you may only ever put one card on your strategic stack. You may then activate it at whatever point, but you may only put one. Once per game, you can put a card on top of the stack before the round begins. And then you can go through, and later you can put another card on top, assuming that the stack is empty. They still don't let you have two cards in the stack, but if you previously used the card in the stack with this ability, that means you can put another card in. So once per game, essentially you get two strategic stack uses. That is 2 inspired uses. That is, if he's your leader, 2+1 to the marches. That is potentially some of the bonuses when we think about banners and some other models as well. The other one they added was the Icaros. That wasn't there before because the model really wasn't around at the previous rules. Friendly cavalry or chariot models in the army that hit enemies in the flank or rear. The friendly cavalry or chariot model gains impact +2 and terrifying 1. They also then, whoever they've hit doesn't count for season objectives. That is always active. When we get to characters, I like that overall. Getting into someone's flank is useful. It's probably more useful for the second part than the first, because the first part, although nice to have, getting into a flank and things like that is not always the easiest thing to do. However, you might play hard to get into the flank because they have a brick that's too big for you to shift, and so you want to deny their ability to grab objectives. So then you can take it as well. Or instead, I should say. I see it more for that than some extra impact and terrifying. Don't get me wrong, those are very good rules, but I see as if your opponent isn't letting you into the flank easily, so they're not giving you easy flank charges, then you might have to spend a full turn or more to line up those. So in my mind, if you're lining them up, you're lining them up to do some damage, but also to grab the objectives. But that's me. All right, for your characters, a lot of the characters didn't have tons of changes like we've seen with some of these other ones. You've got more unit changes than I think some other people did, but less character changes. For the Idolon, you may take no more than 2 ranks of Inquisitors, because Inquisitors now are mainstay instead of being restricted. But they don't let you take any more than you used to. But at least it means now that you don't have to take extras, that you can just take the Idolon and deal with that as well, which is good. Because remember, the Idolon is a brute. So Thor Kittis, Hoplites, Clockwork Hoplites, you can't go any of those units. So there used to be attacks of one of them to be able to get Inquisitors, the unit you're going in. Now you can just go in that unit. That overall, very, very good. The Machinist, Priest 5 is actually not new. It's already Priest 5. Close the gap. So keep in mind, one of the other things they did is that they removed essentially all of the additional guys that you end up getting. So you used to be able to take retinues. You no longer get retinues. But the base abilities that people often always took, or things similar to it, they now given you. So what Close the Gap does, and several of your characters have that, is that you get Unstoppable, so you can reroll your charges. That's the only change for him. The Pole Mark, is that actually a change? Is always the thought I have. Yes, the Pole Mark is now faster with an extra attack and gets Close the Gap. So a little bit better, and you'll notice you're one of the few people that didn't have to pay extra points. I do think, and rightly so, they tend to overcost the brand new armies because it's better for the brand new to be a little bit weak than them be way too good and start just destroying things, because you want people to play it and be able to go up rather than down, I find. That's, at least to me, that's good game design. So didn't get points change. You gained a little bit. The AER Stark got a very similar change, got an extra move, got an extra attack, and got Close the Gap. The difference is, for this one, is that you get the Sonoli as a mainstay instead of as restricted. So you have more mainstay options. And now, if you really do want to take Sonoli, this is actually a good option. You could take several units of them. The Icaros does have some changes. My apologies, I overshot the Icaros. There we go. Not used to the rotations here. The Icaros, we see their defense did go up. Makes sense. Giant crazy thing, cavalry in this case, and impact 4, as well as dread. So Overall, a nice change. Also gained War Chariots. War Chariots really weren't a thing before, so now they have the option to take War Chariots. So the Epicaros in general is just a lot better. Impact 4 is really good. You don't have brutal impact or anything like that, but just make them roll saves. And Dread is quite nice. All right. Character upgrades. The first part is just about the fact your infantry are the only ones who can take banners. This is where some of the biggest changes, I think, occurred. One, your banner of Standard of Last Oration didn't change its points, but essentially swapped its ability. So compared to what some other things did, now you are +2 stands for objectives. And if you are destroyed while in the range of an objective, if it can be seized, that objective zone, the player counts as seizing it. So you kind of plant your flag as they go down fighting. So you get +2 to it. What it used to be before was the now base ability that you count as inspired. So they essentially have swapped those sort of things. All right, so we look at the other banners. We look at the Aristaya. What it used to do gave you flawless drills, so you got an extra free combat reform. What it does now, you get a draw event, pick a target unit within 8 inches, and give them +5 to the move. Goes over phalanx, so you still actually do get the +5. This is a really, really good change. The extra combat reform is fine, especially in this army that's useful because you tend to find you're more of a marching column. So usually I see a lot more as like 2 wide and multiple back. So once you're actually in combat, you probably want to widen out to be able to get more units in. But that's fine. Being able to get the extra move means you're going to get to those objectives sooner. That means that your unit who has phalanx now can actually get somewhere that you want them to be. I do think this is a much better change. The other change that we see here is the Primodynamic Globe, which essentially lets you disrupt like you're a wizard in a range, is now 10 points cheaper. I never really saw it before. I haven't played a whole lot against city-states, I'll be honest, but that's not something I honestly saw before. For the armors, we see that the helm has some extra bits here. Actually, the helm is different. The helm used to be that enemy stands in contact with the character, lose inspired. The helm is a bit different now. For this helm, enemy stands that contacting it lose inspired. In addition, enemy character stands participating in the dual action against them lose the Quicksilver Strike and Flurry special rules. So if you're touching this guy, or if you're touching him, you don't get inspired. And if you're dueling him, you don't get the swing ahead of time, and you don't have to reroll your attacks. So pretty big. It's kept the same amount of points. That's absolutely worth it now, especially if you're putting this on a Polmark or an AER Stark, something like that, where you're either going to be dueling or get dueled. Especially for some of these more killy type characters. Now they might not want to swing at you because you have more wounds, more attacks, and their special bonuses aren't happening. The Atlantean Spear. That is the next change. No, sorry. The Blade. Let me scroll down. The Blade of Erkeres. So for that blade, it went up by 20 points. So let's take a look at this thing. I don't know this one that well, so let me take a look at what it does. +1 to the clash, and suffers -1 to its attack characteristics, and then you gain, this character stand gains the Cleave 4 special rule. Okay, so they made 2 changes here. What it used to do was you get +1 attack and Cleave 1. They doubled the points cost. You get -1 attack. You get 1 extra clash. So now you're clashing on a lot of these cases on, say, 4s and all. I believe it should be around a 4. But you get Cleave 4. So unless they have the best armor and hardened and all these special rules, you're cutting right through them. That is a big points increase. I absolutely love it. I absolutely love that weapon on, honestly, either of them. I think it really helps, especially in, say, terms of duels. It'd be really good for those. Can any of them take... Can we take 1 relic, 2 relics? So the Polmark could take 2. Is 6 attacks. You're going down to 5 attacks. This is a defense 3, resolve 4. Clash of 3, so you're going on Clash 4, assuming not inspired, or Clash 4, rerolling 6s with 5 attacks that you could have Cleave 4 on, so they're getting almost no save unless they have evade. And if you wanted, you could put Since he's allowed to take 2, you could put that helmet on him, so that way people around him aren't inspired. And if he does duel someone, you're in a much, much better shot to make sure you absolutely get through whoever they are. I don't care who you're dueling. With those 2 pieces of equipment, you're probably going to come on top of that duel almost every single time. All right, that gives us our final changes until we get to spells. So we got to skip a few things, which is good. I want to play against these guys more. At one point, I kind of thought about starting them, but there's only so many projects I can work on. All right, so aggressive direction, gain 2 inches. Pretty good. Still scaling 4. You can still get +1 to your clash, but now you got a bigger range to be able to do that. Clockwork Parade did get some changes. You get your distance to be +5, where before it was +4. So you get 1 extra inch on that. Quite nice. And you have a brand new spell for the Machinist, which is Torque. It's 12-inch range. It's 3 scaling. Target regiment becomes heavy until the end of the round. Keep in mind a couple nice things about being heavy. One, you could be light. So I used this actually the other day. I was playing Spires, and Spires have a Biomancy that can turn you from light, or it can turn you to medium, I should say. I really like that with certain of my drones that were light, make them medium, claim objectives. So one option is if you are a light unit, you can now be classed as heavy, so now you are scoring objectives. The other key feature is keep in mind that for heavies, they may do 2 wounds per activation or overall activation to an objective marker. Maybe objective marker is not the right name, but for some reason, essentially the destructible markers. So if someone's in a good position to be able to get those 2 wounds, to be able to take it either from your opponent or just destroy it in general, count them as heavy, do the 2, they're yours. So you can do quite a bit more than with that. I do like that overall. I think being able to take your lights and make them scoring, or being able to destroy objectives, is really actually quite good. And for your Mechanist, honestly, the other one is obviously the aggressive direction to be able to get the extra clash. But if I don't need a clash that turn, I'm using Torque. That's absolutely the one that I would choose next. For the Promethean, no actual change. The attunements were absolutely the same as before. That actually didn't change. They just made it same. It looked like it was. Thor Kiddies went down by 20 points, and they got faster. Oh, sorry. The microphone got moved. So cheaper, quite good. They're light, but notice now you could have them score on certain turns. And their Minotaur Auxiliary is now 5 points cheaper. So in general, they're just cheaper across the board, this particular unit, for everything that they do. And they're a little bit faster. They're 2 defense on 2 resolve. They do have shields, so I guess technically 3 defense on 2 resolve. They're not the most survivable, so you're giving them some cheapness, which is nice. The Salon, I guess maybe Selny, actually went down by 30 points. Now, what I often find, and I agree with this, is if it's a unit that isn't yet released by the time the original rules were, the old rules, that then when the new ones come out, you sometimes see points decrease and other changes like that because it turns out they were too overcosted. Again, especially if the thing's not out. For official play, you can't use it anyway, so I don't think they're quite as worried. They're probably more of using it as a little bit of a testing ground. So when we take a look at this unit, 30 points cheaper is really good because, again, this is a unit that is not the most survivable. For what they're doing, they're shooting unit that's on a volley of 2, so you might need that first action to be able to essentially take aim. It's not take aim anymore, but essentially take aim. And the additional stands are only 40 points instead of 50. I think that's absolutely fair. Your 4 shots at 16, with arcing fire, you are not lighting anyone up in terms of those shots. We're not talking about, certain Spire units in terms of shooting, or the old Dominion units, or Nords, or anything like that. You don't have all the extra special rules. You don't have the extra range like some of the other ones do. So I think they absolutely need to get cheaper. That does feel like a pretty good spot for them. All right, Hoplites. I think the biggest thing is the Minotaurs change by points, so they're getting a little bit cheaper for your Minotaurs. Your Phalangites went down by 10. The attacks did not change. It stayed in red, but that's not different. But you are now looking at 5 less points per. I see... I see a bit of both. I probably have seen more hoplites than phalangites, but phalangites, the fact that you can remove impact and all those sort of things from people, I think this does help them a little bit. They probably didn't need too much change, but those little bits means now that maybe with the extra 10 and additional stands, maybe you can make it a 4-pack instead of the 3-pack you were running. Again, this is an army I tend to see large units of things. So this maybe makes them a little bit more competitive. You're now not looking at if you're low on points, that 10-point difference could make a big difference. Now they're essentially based the same exact points in every way. So now you're making a much more equal comparison. They're essentially saying that these two units count for the same. They just do different things in the army. Looking for other changes. Now, again, they might have done a change they didn't highlight. I do look for those, but there is always a chance that we miss one of them. Looks like the next one is Inquisitors. And again, remember when this first was done, Inquisitors weren't actually a thing. Oh, and I know some of the other spots got moved as well. So Inquisitors were 220. They went down by 20 points, so they're a bit cheaper. And they're 60 points a stand instead of 70. Again, they're probably just a little overcosted. They brought them down a little bit. I do think they're actually really good. Your defense isn't great at 2, but you are Resolve 5. You are 5 wounds, multiple attacks. You're sitting at 6 attacks a pop. You have Flurry, so even though you're on a clash at 2, getting to reroll that, or if you're inspired, that's 75% of those hitting. And you do get some impacts as well with a little bit of cleave. So, quite good. Good way to take these things down is obviously in terms of anything where you can hit them from afar. Move 7 is pretty good, but if you can shoot them down or anything like that, or get into their flanks and make them reroll some of those resolves, that can help you out as well. But absolutely, I do love that. I do think that's actually a really good change. This is an army that I think probably was a bit overcosted, at least for things I saw. And obviously, the points changes are kind of bearing that out in most ways. The Promethean went to 220. What was the Promethean before? 230, so 10 points. That's nice. And the 2 extra wounds, pretty much monsters across the board got about 2 extra wounds. 10 less points, nice. Again, all these points, keep in mind that you no longer have your retinues you're paying for. And unlike most factions, your characters didn't go up, which means if you look at your old list, you take out all the retinues you took, you take out some of these points increases, say for your phalangites or maybe the Promethean you took, and you might be sitting at 50, 60, or 100 points bonus, depending on exactly what you were doing. So you either have enough to maybe get an extra unit in or get a couple stands in, or take some of these upgrades that you weren't doing before. So you can actually afford quite a bit more than you did. Same thing with the Festin. The Festin went down by 10 points. Festin used to be 250, 240, got the extra 2 wounds. So again, a really nice change. Those little bit of points absolutely add up in this game because some of these other stands are only at 40. That means if you were taking a couple of the stands we've already seen, you now could afford an extra. The Minotaurs all went to 6 wounds. We already saw that before, but when they're auxiliary, they kept it the same. So Chariots. Chariots, they broke out a little bit more. So Chariots, you used to have just this War Chariots listing. You were 90 points with some stat block. We notice now that they have 2 different types of Chariots that they list for us. Oop, sorry. Thought I clicked on the thing. It went a little bit too far. My apologies on that. There we go. So when we take a look at these Chariots, War Chariots, they count as a single entry for War Baron building purposes. A single War Chariot entry may contain a maximum of 3 Chariots in any combination. Each Chariot purchased as a separate regiment and used as its own command card. So you're buying these essentially in a group, but you're using them separately. So it's a bit different than what they did before. So for the Logoblon, I don't know. It's probably not how it's pronounced, but so I'm going to go with 130 points. We're looking at move 7, which is essentially what the Chariot was before. Volley and Clash of 2s. It has 6 attacks on 10 wounds with a 3 resolve, 3 defense. There's no evade. You're a Chariot. This is your shooting Chariot. Or actually, my apologies, they're both really shooting Chariots. 7 shots at 10-inch range with armor piercing 1 and torrential fire. The other one has an extra shot, a little bit more range, but it's rapid volley instead. It is a weapons platform. It has dead shot. So remember, dead shot is if they roll 6s on defense, it counts as 2 wounds. Has 3 impact hits, hardened 1, which is really going to help out that flat defense of 3. And it has flank, so just comes in when you feel like it. Notice they get quite a bit more than the old Chariots, but they're quite a bit more. The old Chariots were just fire in advance. That was it. When you look at the old ones, it selects one of the following. So you used to take one of two different types, a scorpion or a different type. You'll notice that the barrage characteristics and also the Fulgent, Phlogiston launcher was essentially what the Flogbolgon does now. Although it's more expensive now, it does get a few extra rules that the other one didn't have. It also has condensed propellant. This regiment's effective range is equal to the regiment's barrage range. Oh, okay. Not quite as needed because... Oh no, my apologies. Thought of it now. When you're in effective range, it's normally half your range. You get the +1 shot in effective range. You don't take penalties anymore like you used to, but you get an extra shot. So this thing essentially is 8 shots then at all times. Why didn't they just make it 8 shots? I guess they wanted to do that because they don't want it to get it to 9 shots, where if you called it 8 and get into effective. So this is the way they put the rule. You're essentially always on 8 shots. 8 shots at 10 inches with armor piercing 1 and torrential fire with dead shot is actually really good. So I was playing, like I said, Spires the other week. And when I was going against someone, they had dead shot on something. And I rolled 3 6s. And I lost a Centaur Avatar and a little bit more from that. So you might be hunting 6s, but if they roll it, you're really going to start hurting people. The other one is the Scorpios then. Essentially, same exact stats. Although this one is now Barrage 8, Armor Piercing 1, Rapid Volley instead. It also has Weapons Platform, also has Dead Shot, has Impact 3, Harden 1, and Flank. So most of it is the same, except instead of Torrential Fire, it's getting Rapid Volley. And if the enemy regiment that becomes a target of this regiment's volley action reroll successful defense rolls of 1, should the shots originate from the flanks or rear. So this thing is meant to get to the side. If it gets to the side, they reroll their 1s, and if they roll into 6s, they take twice as many wounds. And then they give you the number of stands and how many. Notice they still have the same draw event. They still have that fire in advance. That used to be essentially all they had. They had that with, for all intents and purposes, they had some weapons, but the weapons did get a good bit better. Now you have better weapons. You have additional rules. You didn't have flank before. You didn't have hardened before. So you get those additional type of rules, and you have better weapons. So I know these things aren't out yet. I don't like the one Chariot. I don't like the way it's like a face. It weirds me out personally. But if you're playing this army, I do think it's actually a really good choice. I would probably, for the uses of this army, I'd probably go the Scorpios myself. The reason why I like the Scorpios a little bit more, I like the exploiting flanks, because I liked in the idea of this army. You have your objectives in the front. I like the idea of, sorry, the camera's mirroring me backwards. I like the idea of 2 large, or maybe not necessarily 2 large, probably maybe a Hoplites unit and a Phalangites unit. I'm going to try to aim the Phalangites towards your cavalry type unit. The other one, we're going to sit on the objectives. And we're going to try to sit on somewhat more middled objectives. And we're going to sit 2 wide, 3, 4 back, however much it may be. And I'm just going to hope you come in and charge me. And then if you are lining up for those charges or in on those charges, assuming I stick, and we have ways to help make sure that we stick. We have nice ways to get flurry or rules like that. What I then see is Scorpios coming along the side to start picking at those flanks of those models. Because if I'm into the flank, notice this weapon, Armor Piercing 1, if I'm in your side, you're not, say, getting your shields. So I'm really more of like an Armor Piercing 2 if you have shields. I'm making you reroll your 1s, which is much more likely one of the only numbers you might succeed on, because you might be down by 1 or 2 from your overall defense. And any of your 6s are doubling the number of wounds. I said you also have Rapid Volley, which is helping you out as well. The other one is good. Don't get me wrong, I do like it. The other one is, honestly, it's even less range. So I do like this. Get to a flank of someone and just start doing harassing along the edges. And even on that, I might, if I'm in a good spot, just stand there, take aim, fire. So that way, at least I'm hitting on better, because naturally only hitting on 2s. At least now I'm hitting on 3s. I'm getting about 4, maybe a little bit more. Rapid volley we have as well. So pause there briefly, pull up rapid volley in case someone wasn't aware of what it is. What it does. When you perform a volley, each one causes an additional automatic hit. You don't get anything extra from there or anything like that. But that means if you're rolling these 8 dice, if you get a couple 1s, you are now looking at potentially getting more than the average of 4. On that, you should get at least one of them. So you're probably looking at better of an average of about 5, but you could actually spike quite a bit higher. I really do like that one. The other one's good as well. I just like that one because it fits the sort of theme that I want. For last bit, your Satyr Assassin. Now, in addition, this regiment may perform a free additional dual action using its command stand during its activation. However, refusing the duel does not confer the usual negatives. If they have refused duel already, they may not do so again. That part is the same. However, the difference is you used to break when you refuse duels. Now it just says you take the normal minus. So that's the overall distinction. And the rule was always if you're broken, you couldn't refuse a duel. So now they've said, well, if you've already refused one, you can't refuse it again because refusing doesn't break you anymore. So they tell you don't take any negatives. You used to get broken. You don't take any negatives. It never broke you before, but now you don't take these particular negatives, but you can't refuse it twice. So overall, for these changes, everything was absolutely buff. Everything they got was better, except for the fact that you, like I said, as everyone else did, you lost your retinues. But you're not paying more for the bumps you got. Your AER Stark and your Polemark both got bumps. They got no increase in points. Your things like some of your units, was it the Machinist or the Picaros? So I want to make sure I mention the actual correct one. Your command stack is much better. Now you're getting inspired. If you're running an AER Stark, now you can actually get double command stack one of your turns. Your Idolon can take its Inquisitors, so you can technically get out of that cheaper if that's all you want. Overall, depending on exactly what your list was, I see this army as having gained the points from lacking your retinues and the cheaperness of some of these units. You probably gained at least 50 points plus whatever you're doing in retinues. So now you're looking at enough to be able to maybe add an extra unit in of something somewhat cheap, or adding in a bunch more upgrades, or being able to add a couple extra stands to some of these units. Especially when we looked at those Scorpios. The Scorpios was 120. Depending on what you took, you might actually be able to add one in where you didn't have it before. So I really do like the changes they did for them. I don't see anything that felt bad. Again, everyone lost retinues. So like, yes, your characters are not quite as good as they used to be, but you're not paying more, and they did buff them a little bit. So you didn't get hit as hard as some other people did. And I think that's actually pretty good for you. All right, so that's the overall thoughts. If you do play this army, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on it. What do you think in terms of these changes? Are you really liking them? Especially now that you might have played them a bit. How do they feel for you? I know at least for the Spires ones as well as the Old Dominion ones, I've really been enjoying the changes because I've been playing both armies. I haven't played these guys. I haven't played against them in a little bit. Steve does have them, although I just haven't been able to make my way up there because work's been a little crazy. But next week's spring break, so maybe during spring break I can get some extra games in and try them out and see what I feel about all of it. Dan was going to start those as well, but now he's going to wait for Hell to come out. So I think he's going to sell those, and I'm probably going to get rid of my Nords because I never bothered building them. I'm just not feeling it right now. But if you are interested in picking up any Conquest, like I said, we do have a discount code below. You can use that. Saves you 10%, helps us out. Really quite nice. For other Conquest stuff, I'm going to be making a video related to Sorcerer Kings. It's probably going to be in multiple parts because I don't want to do it all at once. I think that's a little bit too much. But I might actually start some of that tonight. We'll see. If not, probably over the next week, you'll see. Next week, I'm off, so you should hopefully see a whole bunch of extra content. This week was a little bit lighter for us. I know Steve had some things going on. Like I said, I was still working extra. I'm working at least one day extra than I normally do, so it made it a little bit tougher. But the following week, we should hopefully get out quite a bit more. At least I'll be getting out quite a bit more because I'm off. All right, well, that believe there's enough points. So, on behalf of everyone here at the show, then, has a good hobby, it's a great gaming.